I think that's quite insightful. So maybe to piggyback off of that insight, you've been exposed to what I would say are some of the best and most innovative design teams at places like Forrester and certainly at Figma. What are the sort of best practices you see across the industry, especially as it pertains to sort of big global or kind of enterprise level organizations?
So obviously on this podcast, we care a lot about feedback. Feedback is big. I've talked a lot about feedback. And then feedback from customers and testing with customers is really big. Getting input along the way, getting input as you're building. You don't have to do the thing that they say, but certainly hearing the thing that they say is really valuable and seems to set teams apart. The other major trend that's happened is design systems. And the rise of design systems and their importance. We haven't talked that much about that on this, in this conversation. But I think in my time at Forrester, it was like 70% adoption of design systems, and the ability for developers and designers to work better together through a design system is also really important. I know there's some data from Forrester about the speed of development when there is a design system. I think it's like 30% faster for developers to do their work, and it can even be bigger depending on the situation. So I think there's a feedback component, there's a design systems component, and then there's also this realization that design can impact things at a business level. Call it big D design or business design or whatever you want to call it. But just having the sort of respect that it's not just about moving pixels, it's also about solving business problems. Is a major component. We did some analysis on recent earnings calls for some of the biggest banks and retailers in Q1 of 2022, and we saw some numbers that 16 out of 20 of those companies mentioned intuitive, seamless, something along those lines, and maybe you as the CEO could tell me maybe don't pay as much attention to those earnings calls and what they say on them. But to someone, reading between the lines, I think if you were at a company that highlighted your, redesign of an app on an earnings call and said, this is an important thing that we're doing and we've fallen behind, we need to step up and this is what we're doing, that's just such a sign of respect. And probably gives a huge boost to that design team too, for the work that they're doing.
I agree. And I think to your point at the very beginning of your answer, it sort of highlights that focus on understanding your customers, right? Being able to highlight that listening and then the reaction and the design work that goes behind it. I think it's really powerful. It's a great point.
And great call out on the design systems too. I feel like we to your point, we haven't touched on that. I think that is, like I was saying today earlier on my call with the engineer, like he was using the design system to create the design, right? And it's like, it's sort of like, people think I'm kind of crazy when I say this, but I also believe that there is similar to how companies have design systems, they also should have like research systems or user feedback systems or these like componentized sort of approaches within the process that sort of slot in to what you're working on. So I don't know. I'm usually the one with the out there ideas that I guess I'm kind of allowed to have them, but I see that someday as being part of how research evolves and customer feedback evolves.
I don't think it's that out there because I think if this is so important, if it's so critical to get feedback from these different angles, then enabling people to do that better instead of just saying like, hey, go figure it out, seems really important. I mean, if they're going to do it anyway, and if we want them to do it, then giving them a little toolbox, giving them a set of practices, a set of principles. Hey, maybe don't ask people to predict, what they're going to do in the future. Ask them what they did yesterday, or ask them what they, would do next with this application. I don't think that's that big of a stretch. And I would join you in hoping that this gets easier and better to do at most organizations, because I think we've all experienced our share of, did they ask anybody about this experience? Did anybody outside the team designing this look at this thing and tell them what it was like? So anyway, validation for your idea.